Thank you all for being here today. In these first few weeks of session, the Missouri Senate has been focused on one of our critical and important constitutional responsibilities, and that is confirming the governor's interim appointees to various boards and commissions throughout the state. In total, the Senate approved more than 90 interim appointments. Those boards and commissions oversee everything from public safety to public health to public education. The work they do directly affects Missourians' daily lives, and the Senate takes its advice and consent role very seriously. Among those confirmations, one of the most significant actions that the Senate took was approving the new members of the St. Louis City Board of Police Commissioners. One of the Senate Republicans' top goals this last session was to remove politics from the management of the St. Louis Police Department and to enhance public safety. The confirmation of these commissioners was that last legislative step needed to bring our vision for the governance of the St. Louis Police Department to a reality. Public safety in the city of St. Louis is a daily concern for the people who live and work in the city, and the role that the Police Commission is going to play is central to supporting effective law enforcement in one of our state's largest cities. This week shows that the Senate is ready to get to work. We are doing our work, fulfilling our responsibilities, and staying focused on the things that matter to Missourians. And with that, I know Senator O'Laughlin and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
What now?
Or if not, we can go home. Well, look, I mean, we're going to continue working with our Democratic colleagues to find a path forward to get some things done. Obviously, you saw a few changes to the Senate rules this week, which created the path that was needed to get some of these important gubernatorial appointments across the finish line. And I have no doubt that we'll continue to work with our colleagues to make sure that we have a productive session. We owe that to Missouri citizens.
What did you make of that compromise?
I was supportive of it. Obviously, I voted in favor of the rule change. We'd had some extensive conversations with the Minority Caucus about what that path might look like. There was initially a proposal to raise the threshold for a PQ to 23 votes. I think you saw Senator Beck filed a resolution to that effect. We basically said that's just not something that we're willing to entertain. And so we went back and forth, and ultimately we came to the solution of raising the threshold for the signatures for the PQ from 10 to 18. My perspective on that, and I think the caucus's perspective is, as a practical matter, we don't send PQ petitions forward without 18 signatures anyway. But at the same time, it would, stop a rogue PQ petition, for lack of a better word, if you had, a smaller group of senators that wanted to send something forward, sometimes maybe just to generate some controversy, knowing it's not going to pass, at least stop some of that from happening. And so, anyway, I think it was a net positive rule change for the Senate.
Was this specifically designed to spring loose the appointments? So was this a hurdle we had to cross by doing this, or is this a long-term rule change that you think will be beneficial?
Well, I mean, and I'll let Senator O'Laughlin speak to this too. Number one, it was part of the negotiation to get the gubernatorial appointees confirmed. In terms of whether it's a long-term rule change, I would suspect that it probably will be. There was a great deal of consensus in the Senate when you saw the final vote on these rule changes, and even the members that voted no, they expressed a little bit of concern on the floor. But as you saw, there was no filibuster, so there was really no what I would consider to be staunch opposition to these rule changes. So I would imagine that these will be a permanent fixture to the Senate rules going forward.
Even the last week, I mean, if you have to lay something over for 24 hours, or is that, did you guys come to an understanding that maybe the last week is different?
No. Well, I mean, first of all, most of the conference committee reports are going to be taken up and passed during the last week. I would expect this session to be similar to that. I actually, and by the way, most of my colleagues, even the ones who voted no on the rule change, they didn't have a problem with that rule change. I think it's a net positive. At the end of session, we get all of these conference committee reports that are like fresh off the press. I mean, the paper's still hot. Somebody comes to me and says, hey, I'm ready to go to my report. And nobody's read the thing, And so this gives everybody an opportunity to digest those reports, understand the contents of the conference committee reports before we actually vote on them. This mirrors the rule that already exists in the House. What I've told my members is our intention this session would be on the Thursday of the last week, would be to hold the journal open, to recess when we're done with session, hold the journal open until everybody has had their conference committee reports read in, and at that point we would adjourn. So people can still, up to Thursday evening, get their conference committee reports in the journal and then be able to go to them the last day of session. Remember, this is a legislative day, not a calendar day.
The House is working on a BLT bill, slot machine bill. I believe you said before that that's not a priority here. You still feel that way, that there are a lot of lobbyists in the building specifically trying to get that passed? Where's the Senate on that for both of you?
So that was actually an interview with Sarah, as a matter of fact. And the point that I made with her in the interview is, we had an amendment that was offered on the floor, I think by Senator Schroer a few years ago, to legalize VLTs. This was part of the conversation on sports wagering. It did not pass. It was not a particularly close margin. If you look at the composition of the members in the Senate, it's virtually identical with when that amendment had passed. I don't think that the sea change has happened in the Senate's composition where I would expect a dramatically different result. And so, that's, we will see whenever the bill comes over from the House and, if it gets to the floor and gets through committee where it stands. But there would have to be a lot of senators that have changed their position, from 2 years ago for that to have a realistic shot on the floor.
What do you think of expanding gambling at gas stations?
I don't like it.
Okay, why?
Well, just in general, I think that gambling, some people look at it and think, oh, this is just a fun little thing that I can do on the weekend or, now and then. But then you read all kinds of reports about people who are addicted to it. With the advent of all of these machines in gas stations, restaurants, everywhere you go, they're there. And you see people there playing them and, from appearance anyway, they don't look like people who can afford to, lose a lot of money. I've never been an advocate of gambling. So there's really two sides to the thought that, well, they're already there, so if we made them legal, then they would at least be regulated and they'd be taxed. And I'm not going to say that there's nothing to that argument. There is. But just in the short time that I've been here, it just seems like we have talked about so many marijuana and gambling bills, and we're going to tax those, and they're going to pay for veterans and education and do all of these great things. But no one talks about the societal cost of it and what it does to people and their families, and that's kind of my concern. So,
Both chambers passed their first bills of the year today. Do you feel like the legislators moving quicker this year? Is it on par with last year?
well, I would say it's on par with last year. We never start out very quick. I don't know if it's like a horse race, but you kind of come out of the gate and then everybody kind of settles into their spot. And I think that's about where we're at right now. One of the things that we have tried to do, and I think it's worked pretty well, is we try to make sure that everyone on our side in our caucus is kind of united, and we make sure that we're on the same page. Even if we don't agree, we don't all agree, but we keep everybody together, because it really is a team sport. So if you come into the Senate and you're there just for what you think is important or just for yourself, you're not going to be very successful. We try to always work with the Democrats. We realize there are fewer of them, but they also have valid opinions and points of view. And we sort of have a new system working over there. You have a leader and then a leader in waiting. So that's a little bit different than it has been in the past, but we're working with it, and it seems to be working pretty well. So I think we'll be okay.
Lots of sore feelings with how last session ended as well as the second special session. Do you feel like this, rule change kind of and being a true compromise? I feel like maybe you think that's kind of thawing that discontent that we saw at the end.
Yes, yes. Everyone looks for a little bit of give from the other side. So I think that it's seen that way. I have reminded people, and I'll remind everyone here today, that we do have 24 members and they have 10. And for the last 7 years, we haven't really been able to get through a really big policy because of infighting on our own side. And so that was our first goal, was to get everyone together, support the governor and what he wanted to get done. And it worked pretty well. So, you know, if you're a sort of an observer of the process, you would look at it and say, you know, eventually probably those 24 people are going to get together and they're going to pass what is a priority for their caucus. So I didn't think anyone should be shocked by it, but I think some people were kind of surprised that we managed to do that. But
Does that include the state of the judiciary and how the Senate blocked going to the judiciary last week?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, you're united.
Mhm.
Was it a unified effort then to try and protest the state of the judiciary last week?
I think the majority felt that, and I certainly feel this way, it seems like every major decision we've made somehow ends up at the court and it gets reversed. And that can't be just random chance, in my opinion. And there are people who think that the court plan needs to be changed. I'm one of them. Doing that is a pretty tall task, but I think you need to have people of all opinions on the court. And right now, I think the court leans decidedly to the left, and we lean decidedly to the right.
How can that be if a majority have been appointed by Republicans?
Well, that would be my question. I mean, not everyone defines what they feel is conservative the same. And you really only get to choose from a sort of a small little group of people, which is already kind of vetted. So it's not like you have a wide open thing. The lawyers themselves are heavily invested in who gets to the final round. So maybe, not maybe, I think that lends itself to sort of shrinking the viewpoints that are going to be represented.
The land conveyance bill passed today includes an easement that would make it easier to build a data center in Jefferson County. Does this signal the legislature's approval of data centers in the state?
Not on my part. I think, you know, the data centers have become sort of a flashpoint for people, and I understand they have concerns about them. But I think people in general feel that they don't know all the facts about things, and I think that's true. And I think each community has to decide, is this good for our community? And they have to decide what is good and what isn't. One of the things that I do not like, and I'm not sure how this becomes any different, are the NDAs. It seems like there's a lot of NDAs being signed, and those then prevent people from actually knowing what is in the deal. You know, so I think a community has to know, what are we giving up to have this here, and what are we getting in return? I mean, people deserve to know that. And sometimes that information isn't available. So then people start imagining the worst. Okay.
What kind of restrictions do you think should go on those data centers?
I don't know that I know enough about them to tell you. I think that, for instance, in Kansas City, one that's operating now, and I think there's a more massive one coming in, and I think there's been a lot of tax incentives granted. I just think each community has to weigh that out. Obviously, at least it seems obvious to me, we're going to have data centers because we're all using data more and more and more all the time. And so it's got to be located somewhere. I think that there are opportunities that could exist from having them. And then, of course, there could be negative consequences to some of it, but I don't hardly know of any product that you don't have good and bad. So I just believe that the tax-paying citizens need to understand the full picture before a decision is made, and I'm not sure they do understand that.
What's on deck for the Senate? Are there any policies you think are coming up soon?
There's all kinds of things. We have more than 1,000 bills, I think.
You
So
say your caucus is all on the same page. You know, what are the top priorities you're on the same page about?
well, we're all on the same page about each one of us wants to pass our own priority. So we want to support the governor's tax policy. I know that there will be undoubtedly there will be some bills regarding life, and there will be some bills regarding guns and, who should have guns and who shouldn't. We continue to look at ways to keep the streets safer, ways to support law enforcement.
What do you think, what's on deck for next week in the Senate? Is anything
That's Tony's
stand
job.
out?
I mean, you can look at the calendar. I mean, there's not a lot of controversial legislation on the calendar. So, I mean, I think the mindset that Senator O'Laughlin and I have had is like, as we're kind of easing back into routine business, start with some easy, low-hanging fruit legislation, maybe not the most provocative things in the world. And so the calendar is largely composed of that type of legislation. One notable exception to that would be the hemp cannabis bill. That's one of those bills where Senator O'Laughlin and I think the majority of our caucus feels that these, gummy-like THC edibles and infused beverages that we know minors have ready access to in convenience stores, that's a public safety concern. And so that's something that we would like to tackle early. Understanding, of course, that that issue is kind of unique because you have some Republicans who are against changing the law, some Democrats who are against changing the law, and then some Republicans and Democrats who are in favor of it. And so I think you're going to see both bipartisan support of that bill when we put it on the floor, as well as bipartisan opposition. That was intentional on our part. We kind of want to see how that plays out. And so that's why that was the controversial bill we decided to put on the calendar.
Can you give a response about the whole Misha situation? Because the governor mentioned it in his State of the State address, and now there's this lawsuit by the Attorney General. I'm just curious what you think of. Do things need to be changed? Yesterday I think Misha said they're under attack and everything. So just curious what you think.
So we're going to turn that one over to Senator Bean. As you know, he sponsored the legislation that we had on the floor this week on the Misha reform. So Senator Bean.
Yeah, and if I understand your question right, I mean, we have seen this problem that, as I said on the floor, is not something that just happened yesterday. It's been happening for several years. I mean, we've heard comments that have gone back, like I say, 20 years ago. So I think it's just something built up, and we look like it's time to have an oversight of Mission.
Well, is there anything else besides the board policy then that you don't like with Misha? I'm just curious if there are other things that constituents are complaining about.
Well, it's mainly in the appeals process that we have seen. I mean, we've heard a few on residency as well, but I think as you saw in the lawsuit that was filed yesterday, I think Misha has more problems than just appeals. So.